Hello and welcome to another episode of the Data for Subscriptions podcast, this time going live. My name is Berat Donian, I'm your host, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming Hannah Hanrahan to our show. Hannah, you're Head of Revenue Operations at Atrius Enterprise Solutions. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here and chat with you today.
For everybody tuning in today, you can drop your questions and comments into the chat. We'll make sure that we pick them up along the way, or we'll make sure that there's also a Q&A section at the end, at which point you could either add additional questions and we'll also pick up the remaining ones along the way that you've added. All right, with that, Hannah, tell us what you do at Atrius Enterprise Solutions.
So I lead our revenue operations team, and my team focuses on really streamlining the customer journey. And we do this through supporting what I call the backstage operations. So really working to make sure people, process, tools, handoffs, all of those elements across the customer journey are working well together. So we do this by really fostering collaboration and visibility across all the go-to-market teams. And some of the core processes we oversee are things like the end-to-end quote-to-cash process. So from external training of our sales team to the back end and making sure all the pieces are functioning correctly. And then the SaaS contract amendment and renewal process is one that we own and hold in place and make sure everybody understands how it works, and then the technology backs it too. Then we've also got just our traditional sales ops, right? Deal desk approvals, sales methodology, making sure that our sales team's productive, training and enablement, and supporting execs on various KPI tracking. So just a little taste of what we're doing on our side.
Gotcha. And tell us more about the company as well. And I understand you're part of Acuity Brands.
We are, yeah. Yep. So Acuity Brands has been around for quite some time. You may have encountered them. They're a market-leading industrial technology company, and our mission is really to use technology to solve problems in spaces, light, and more things to come. So we're constantly innovating across the company. We've got a global footprint and are broken into two segments. So we've got the Acuity Brands and Acuity Lighting Controls. And then we've got the Intelligent Spaces group, which is where Atrius fits in. And on the Intelligent Spaces group, our goal is to make buildings smarter, safer, and greener. And we're doing this through software, sensors, and controls. So there's quite a bit going on, lots of room to play around with just various process and systems. I would also say that it's a very values-driven organization from the top down. So it might be rare in a company of this size and that's been around for so long, but there's a lot of innovation within the company, and that's really coming from the top down. Our leaders really instill this owner's mindset within the associates, and so it's an interesting and fun place to be.
And tell us a little bit more about the objective for the company. And perhaps if you want, you can expand a little bit more on Acuity Brands and down to Intelligent Spaces Group. But mostly, of course, let's spend time on Atrius.
Yeah. So at Atrius, our core products are energy and sustainability, which is software that enables sustainability managers and facility operators to centralize their energy and utility data, normalize it, visualize it in standard reports, and then they can accelerate their path to zero emissions and identify ways to bring down that energy cost. And this is pretty difficult to do because, the hardware in buildings isn't always something that is accessible. So there's a piece of integrating that into, a software platform, and then that normalizing piece. I would say we have a pretty excellent example of this that our company just launched with our annual Earth Light report. And what's exciting about this report is it's really a culmination of utilizing our Atrius energy and sustainability and our own manufacturing environment to enable us to track carbon emissions and then report out on it. And so we're using it to really bring down our own consumption and meet our own sustainability goals.
Yeah. And to spin on that, then if we would look at it from more of a business model perspective, as the framing of the conversation today alluded to, you're driving a SaaS-based model within Atrius, within the totality of the company. So tell us more about how it is to build a software as a service business within, a technology leader that has been around for, over 100 years, I believe.
Right. Yeah. So I would say the way our business is segmented, it enables Atrius to operate independently. And I think that setup has enabled us to, foster and build a team that's really focused on subscriptions and software and driving best practices and the tools and technology that we use within this business line. But while this independence gives us flexibility, there's also a challenge there, right? Because we are one business and we do try to work closely together. And so sometimes that independence creates silos in terms of just the tools and the systems and being able to sell together. So that's where, back to my role, I think there's the role of growing Atrius Energy and Sustainability. And then there's the role of helping break down the silos there and identifying opportunities for us to work better together from that operational back-end perspective. And a lot of times that comes to just, educating teams on product versus subscription and looking for ways and opportunities that we can translate some of what we're doing on our side into other business practices across the organization.
So we're going to break down the respective parts of the challenges. But before we do, you want to talk a little bit about an important point you made in terms of the difference between a product and a subscription, because you called that out. And I think that's an important point for you to elaborate a little bit more. What are the specific challenges and differences?
Yeah, I mean, the one that I kind of go to is, a visual of, a product tends to be a one-time sell, and it's just like it's more linear, right? Where a subscription, that customer journey is really circular. And when I go back to our customer journey and how our teams work with each other, we need to have a really succinct, streamlined way of working together that sets various teams up for success. So I talk a lot to my team and the teams about that, right? It's not just doing your job and then throwing it over the fence and assuming the other person's going to do it. Everything that we do builds up to a satisfied customer, a streamlined onboarding experience, and then ultimately like expansion and renewals. And so, again, that model is it's very much a SaaS model, but I think there's a lot of that can be translated into, a product-led business too. There's a lot of the customer piece, but renewals management, subscription management, start date, end dates, kind of living in that world of amending contracts and that type of stuff is what I tend to talk a lot about internally. I'd say the other one is just KPIs and metrics. I was on a call recently and we're talking about ARR, and it was two very different parts of the business. And in that, the language of ARR was interpreted differently, right? For a subscription business, it's, are you continuing to grow your annual revenue based on start date, end date? It's not like invoices and orders. And so the data that you need to collect to be able to create that type of report is a little bit different, right? And there's a little bit of a learning curve there. So those are some of the areas that I tend to run into often just in the day-to-day.
How many products are you running at Atrius today?
So today we have 3 core product lines, but the back end of that, is about 200 SKUs, just with the various options and configurations and, ways that we're selling it.
Gotcha. And how does your pricing structure? You alluded to it with the 200 different SKUs and so on, but just walk us through. You have subscriptions, you've already mentioned usage, any form of hybrid?
We do have a hybrid usage solution. So yeah, subscription, annual subscription, you know, and then yeah, usage. We do usage. It's probably not the most streamlined way of doing it. It's a bit of a manual process, but we offer that to some of our customers as well. And we have like a tiered, different various tiers that will, based on quantity. So kind of waterfall pricing methodologies. Um, it's pretty straightforward. I think that's kind of the main ones that we're tackling.
So many companies that have been doing subscription in, let's say, various shapes and forms for a long period are now kind of looking into usage based. When you've looked at your customer base, what was the triggering point for you to start to deploy and use usage on top of subscription, basic subscription, so to say?
Yeah. So, well, we do collect data on our side, right? That's part of how it's these devices that we're connecting into in buildings have data points. And so the data that's consumed and then reportable is a huge part of the value, right, that we're offering to customers. And so that's where we've landed on exploring that as a way of pricing the whole system itself.
Have you so far at least seen customer demand or customer request for usage, or is it mostly, as you already said, that you learn from your sensor and product usage, and therefore you can also use that as a means of offering different?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some evaluation going there in terms of if that's a model to go deeper into. There are different contract scenarios that we encounter as well where it makes more sense. So some of these are partners, right, who are reselling. And so in that scenario, we'll have a contract with our partner, just kind of standard annual. And then as they bring on data for their customers, that's where there's a little bit of a variable in terms of the usage. So I think it kind of comes down to really that contract scenario, and then a little bit more exploration on how it would make sense with the direct users.
Let's talk about your quote to cash setup. You want to walk us through what you have?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. So we use Salesforce is really a core piece of what we're using,
Yeah.
and we use CPQ within that to manage configuration, pricing, our products, subscriptions, contracts. Right, all of those pieces are included, and we use Avalara. It's connected in for the tax part of it. And then we connect to Maxio, which is the invoicing, billing. It's where we're doing our ARR. And that's really it at the moment for us. There's a few different systems internally. And so our core piece is nice. Opening that up to the different business units is one of the, I guess, challenges that is on my list.
Yeah, I was about to go there, but I just before, for CRM, you use Salesforce as well, or do you have a different tool for it?
We do. Yep. Yeah. We use Salesforce as well.
So for CPQ and CRM, gotcha.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right. Let's talk about the point that you already mentioned now. Of course, you exist within a large organization that has obviously its own quote to cash kind of structure, so to say. So why is this is it a challenge on its own to kind of dock in?
Yeah, and the challenge is, as we work more closely together, and having different systems and integrating them together, and then, having unified data and consistent data, all of those pieces, come up. And so, as well as some systems are set up in one way, so we're set up really to manage the SaaS piece of the business, and others are more of that transactional, not tracking start dates, end dates, some of those pieces that are critical for our core business. So as we talk about, selling through different channels or different parts of the business, this is where we run into what's the easiest path to transact.
And how do you manage for that today? I guess you have to put in a lot of manual labor to do that.
Yeah, well, I think we're just kind of scratching the surface here, right? So, and the workaround that we have in place is somewhat manual, right? It's kind of a handoff, and we've got a divided, at this point, it comes into our system and we track this element of it. So each business is really continuing to manage in the way that they have always managed. For the customer, it's not always ideal, right? Because if you're selling a suite and you're purchasing through different entities,
Yeah.
that's not my ideal. So that's one that I'm kind of continuing to push on. How do we handle that in a different way without breaking systems? Because many of these companies are established, and really there's only like a few core companies. It's not like we've got tons of variations, but we're not going to rip and replace, right? And so just really identifying what are those ways that we can connect these systems. That's like the path of least resistance, really.
I think what you're going through is very common, at least from my experience and vantage point, especially when you are a unit trying to drive, let's say, innovation or just a different business model like you do, and you exist in an organization that obviously has a quote to cash infrastructure in place, having done business for years, and they're just simply set up, and their capabilities as well are completely different. Just a follow-up question on this. So you do have custom situations where the customer not just buys the Acuity, the Atrius solutions. It's combined from, for example, the division with the Intelligent Spaces group. It could be something from Acuity Brands, other divisions. So, and then the customer then would have multiple pieces of invoice. Is that the case?
Yeah, we do have a few scenarios like that. And again, those are not, not the norm, but I think that's the direction that we'd like to go in, right? And so we do encounter that. Yeah.
Of course, makes a lot of sense from a company standpoint that you want to basically leverage your entire portfolio to sell to customer and fulfill their needs.
Mm-hmm.
But then off the back of that, from a customer perspective, you want to have one invoice and not several.
Yep. Yep.
Let's go back a little bit more to the usage-based pricing that we spoke about a few minutes ago. Typically, I want to get your pulse on it. Typically, while basically most companies want to try and do it, it's also a bit scary because it's perceived as being complex. Do you have your view on why that could be?
Yeah. So, I mean, my view on the complexity, because I got a little deep into trying to unlock this on our side. So, one, there's getting the usage out of the actual product, right? And so that's an entire work stream on that side. And then delivering that to your system that has your contracted rate with your customer. And then that system needs to get it to your billing and invoicing tool, right? And so there's a few layers to unravel. I think some tools that are out in the market space today, if you're starting fresh, you can do a lot of it. But the complexity is often in the tools that you already have established, right? And not necessarily wanting to rip and replace one to make that all work together.
Got it. Let's talk a little bit more about the different systems that are out there, because many do opt for good and bad to go with a, let's say, a homegrown, you build it yourself and try to fulfill the needs as best as you can, versus to get like a purpose-built system. What is your take on the respective? And you, of course, alluded here to the fact that there are software in the market that does this very well. What's your take? Do you think that, what is your advice as well in terms of setting this up in the best way?
Yeah. So I think my experience here comes a bit more from having moved from, on the Atrius side, a homegrown CPQ tool to Salesforce CPQ. And I think usage-based fits well into here, right? Where we built something and somebody built it before I got there, right? And so it wasn't clearly documented how all of the pieces worked together. And I think it was built well for initially tracking a contract and a subscription. But when you got through to renewals, amendments, prorating, it started to fall apart. There were just a lot of pieces that didn't get thought through all the way. And so those are kind of the challenges, right? I think if you have a person dedicated and you're really committed to continuing to build that and own it and have clear documentation on how all the pieces work together, which is a pretty big undertaking, right? Normally you want your engineers focused on the product itself. That's what you run into versus, you know, it's a market out there. So I kind of would rather depend on the Salesforce CPQs and the other tools out there who live and breathe this and are constantly dealing with these challenges every day, to run it on our side than try to cobble it together and keep it running and working. Usage-based, I'd imagine, is similar in that there's a lot of gotchas along the way that you just don't have line of sight on until you're there. And then you've got to figure out how to work through it and fix how it's been built.
And that's a great point that you made in terms of when it comes to usage-based, there's a lot of aha moments that you don't know what you don't know, which is great that you raised, because again, my perception is that you want to have a setup where you can test, learn, and you can change, adapt quickly without cornering yourself. Because you actually don't know, to your own point that you made a few minutes ago, we don't know exactly, because there's still room for some testing. You said that you're picking up usage from your product based on the sensors, and now you're testing. You want to see how that's received. And that agility and flexibility it's really, really important. Let me ask you, within realistic frames, what is an ideal kind of usage data management setup for you? Now, we've spoken about one important thing, which I can just maybe start with, is the importance of the system being able to kind of dock in to what you already have, it seems. But if you would, you could make your wish list here.
Yeah, I mean, easy to use, but so ideal. So I've encountered usage mainly through a desire on our side to be more, have more of a product-led growth mentality, and I see that almost as unlocking another sales channel, right? So we have our direct sales channel, we've got our channel partners. Self-serve is another channel we could unlock, and I think the product-led piece is similar to self-serve, but kind of along the same lines. And my ideal is having, one kind of unified system at the core that all of these pieces can just simply feed through and use that core infrastructure, and then pass through seamlessly to the invoicing and the billing part of it. So my vision is really a pretty unified data platform that all of these pieces are not rebuilt and coming out of different systems, but leveraging a similar product SKU, plug into a unified account view, just like seamless integration, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if I think it is achievable with many of the tools out there, but I don't know if that's the detail that you're looking for.
No,
but,
absolutely. Absolutely. I was
yeah.
about to just ask you, there's this term that I keep hearing often, is a single source of truth for data. Does that resonate with you? Is that what you're thinking of when you say a unified system that kind of orchestrates it all, that can talk to the different systems?
Yeah, and I think where I encountered this in particular, so there's one of the customer view. So what the customer has purchased, their start date, their contracts, the specific licenses. And then I think the other is that more back end piece of your product, So right now I actually set up products in 3 different systems. because we have to, right? But I think the unity actually starts to even get into that element, right? Of just a shared product, SKU across systems, which could potentially go into different business units, right? And like solve some of the silo challenges that we have. That's what I kind of think about with unified.
Gotcha. Let's talk a bit more about your go-to-market as well, because we talked about the product, we've talked about your infrastructure and backend. You already mentioned you have your own sales organization. You've alluded to the fact that you want to do more and more PLG, product-led growth, which I could see self-serve, self kind of consumption mode. But you also sell through channel, right?
Right. Yeah. So we've got kind of a direct sales motion. I think product-led is a little future state, but and then we also sell through the channel through one of our sister companies that's part of ISG.
You want to talk about some of the, let's say, challenges that you have with? Let's talk about direct and your sales channel because of the topics that we discussed today.
The challenges on the direct side.
Yeah, exactly. If there are any, in terms of, given what we've spoken about, how your portfolio is structured and your backend, what potential challenge do you have on the direct side?
Yeah, on the direct side, I would say our system today is mostly built for the direct sales motion. I think it can always be easier, and maybe there's like self-serve elements that we introduce to the customer that takes the sales rep out of some of those cycles.
Yep.
But I think our system is, leveraging CPQ in a way that actually that part's pretty streamlined. It's never going to be perfect.
Yeah.
So the challenges I think we encounter more are on that channel side, and that's potentially solvable with more of a self-serve, but it's just a very different sales motion, right? Where we're a few layers from the end user.
Yeah.
And so, we're a little bit of a middleman in making sure that we're tracking subscriptions, tracking renewals, some of those processes and just that expertise don't exist within the channel, and they might not necessarily want to do that. So those are kind of the nuances that we run into on that end.
Let me just double click on that on the channel side so I make sure I understand. So is it so that your channel sales, they're not, from a capability standpoint, as ready to sell subscriptions as you are, or at least your portfolio modality requires, because you're selling basically only subscriptions, so that's the only way to sell? Is that the challenge?
That is the challenge. Yeah.
And how do you solve for that today, given everything that we've discussed? If they're not really apt to do that, but you're still selling through the channel, how's that kind of?
Yeah. So today, I think it's about like the relationships, the channel enablement, really focusing on the channel partners who are more interested kind of in that approach and see the value in it. But it's also a bit of showing the value there and guiding and really helping bring them along with us. And I think as far as the back end systems go, this one I'm still kind of trying to unlock a bit of just how do we make it more easy for them, giving them tools and systems that are simple to manage that on their side.
Gotcha. All right, great. Let's see if we have any questions coming in. Right, none so far that we can pick up. So let me go one more. So for anybody who is kind of sitting in the same situation as you, which I'll attempt a summary of, which is that you exist in a large, successful organization that has been around for a long time, obviously a mature quote-to-cash infrastructure for selling product in one time, and now has a unit that kind of drives the business model shift towards subscriptions and further into usage. What is your advice of the key, let's say, capabilities and aspects to take into consideration to successfully execute on that motion?
Mhm. Yeah, I would say I definitely consider it a journey, right? It's a bit of a journey to get here, and there's a lot of different ways of approaching it. And I like to often think of just a crawl, run, walk, so starting small. And what I've seen is there are actually a lot of parallels and things that are the same in terms of just how service contracts or maintenance are set up, right? And that they've got start date, end dates, and those things can translate pretty well into a subscription model, right? And can be an easy starting point to get your processes aligned. But I think there's a bit of a buy-in here too. And it really needs, because to do some of this, especially in a larger organization, we're talking about internal systems that are at the root of the company, right? And so, if you're not an established side of the business like we are, where we're kind of independent to manage some of these things, it can be a little bit challenging. And so I think there's, a bit of maybe identifying areas that you can monetize and putting a dollar behind it,
Yeah.
and then starting to establish some buy-in across different leaders that can help move that forward. I think it really does have to start from the top too, at some point where the team recognizes that it's something that they want to do from a leadership side, and realize that it is a different business model, right? Where you're going to need specific teams, expertise, maybe some technology incorporated into the tool set to start to build it. So I think those are really core, and it comes to just a really succinct strategy vision. And then that can be broken down into small, simple steps to slowly move there. And usage is like the end, like usage is pretty complex. And so starting there might actually not be the place to start if you need to build up the systems and the internal rigor to be able to just manage more of a subscription side of the business.
Somebody, I'm not sure this is a perfect way of phrasing it, but somebody said usage is basically subscriptions on steroids, meaning that it's everything that subscription does. It's more sophisticated. It allows you to do much more personalized, if you will, but it also comes, if you will, at a cost, in the sense that it requires much more. As you've been quite precise on with regards to your quote to cash system that you have, how you're managing today, also the competence questions, the intra-company challenges that you have as well.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
So
And I
Hannah,
do think it's achievable. It just, it entails a good strategy, a good plan and having that top level buy-in to then just start going through and starting, just start small.
absolutely, I would second that for sure. And we also have many companies that have successfully deployed and gone quite far with usage based, and of course that typically ends up being a hybrid, because there's always subscription on some level and then there's usage on top of, for sure. But it is so that the requirements just escalate quite dramatically when you go. But I'm keen on asking you, because you've talked about that a self-serve, also PLG mode, is something of a, coming next. I'm keen on asking you, so what excites you about the next, say, 6 to 12 months?
The next 6 to 12 months. I think we have some really exciting, just kind of better together opportunities within these business units, especially on the ISG side. And so seeing some of these strategies and pieces come together is exciting, right? It's tough. It's not an easy thing to do what we're trying to do, and but I can kind of see that light at the end of the tunnel, and so it's an exciting place to be. I see just the industry talking a lot about sustainability. We were in the smart buildings kind of area, and bringing devices and sensors and things that are really on the edge into this platform. It's an exciting spot, and I think it's something that other companies and industries have already gone through, but we're just starting to experience it on the building side.
Personally, I think you're in a super interesting space. And, the whole notion, we spent a lot of time today about talking about how you're going to deliver in relation to your business model. But if we talk about what you actually do, simplifying building owners, facility owners, and basically being able to get more out of their investments at the same time, do so in a sustainable fashion. Super critical, I think, is top of mind for everybody. I also think it's really exciting that you, in spirit of your crawl, walk, run, that you're definitely in walking mode across the board, I would say. So it's going to be really interesting to follow you guys in terms of how you move forward with potentially dipping your toes into some form of a self-serve mode that can help both your channel side, your direct mode, as well as just going maybe all the way over time.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
I'm going to attempt my take on the most pressing points that you've raised, and let's see if I got them right or if you help me by correcting me. To me, it's striking how you have consistently talked about the ability of integrating with existing systems, because while if all of us could start fresh, we could do differently. And that is very seldom the case. So, existing systems easily integrate, reusing existing investments. It's very clear from what you've said.
Yeah.
The, the avoid, rip, and replace is a follow on that one. You also mentioned user interface and the ability of easily being able to manage that, it being important because you do put in a lot of manual efforts to make it work today.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And the third thing that I take with me is what I actually wrote down that was very well said, is this unified system that kind of orchestrates and manage the data flow so that it can connect to all of the different systems and can work now and in the future. Did I miss anything important, Hannah?
I think those are the big ones. I think you did a good job. Yeah.
Pass the test. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
you passed the test.
Hannah, this has been really fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's always fun to talk about this stuff in the weeds with somebody who appreciates it.
Certainly. And thanks to everybody tuning in today.